My name is Sean Hansen. I'm a professor over at the business school, and I have the pleasure of introducing Stephanie Dewar. Dewar? Did I pronounce that right? She is a doer, as you'll learn here. Before I introduce Stephanie, just a quick thing. We're going to have surveys being passed around. If you wouldn't mind just filling those out and handing them back, she'll be standing kind of towards the back as you leave. We would appreciate that. So let me introduce Stephanie. Stephanie has worked for Salt Lake City Department of Public Utilities as Water Conservation Coordinator since the job was created in 2001, and is responsible for the development, implementation, monitoring, evaluation, funding, and budgeting of water conservation programs for Salt Lake City and portions of unincorporated Salt Lake County. She serves as the information officer for the department. She holds degrees in political science, economics, history, and a certificate in secondary education from San Jose State University. She's formerly taught high school in California and Colorado, and as a landscape professional for nearly 20 years in Northern California, Colorado, Nebraska, and Utah. She gained a great appreciation for the concepts of the right plant for the right place. And I can verify that. I just spent a few minutes asking about what you can plant in Utah. I'm new to Utah. So she says, know the terrain and sunscreen. She's taught classes in gardening, landscape design throughout Salt Lake Valley, and has published articles on related topics. A few years ago, she returned to school for more school and to earn a master's in professional writing. So with that, let's welcome Stephanie.
Hi. So my name is Stephanie. I'm Salt Lake City's Water Conservation Program Coordinator. Can everyone hear me okay? I just want to make sure that this, I don't normally bother with the mic because I'm loud by birth, so, but I'll do it this time because the kind gentleman in the back, they're taping this, which is sort of odd. But anyway, so hi. As Sean mentioned, I used to be a high school teacher, so I admit I love asking questions and I love pop quizzes. So I've got a couple questions for you both. So when they asked me to present today, they asked me to talk about landscape efficiencies, and I asked who's the audience, and they said yes. So, so they said it was sort of like it would be business people. Are there any business people here? Yay! Okay, so there's my audience. Way to go. Homeowners? Any homeowners? Oh, there's a few. And students? Students of landscaping? Just out of curiosity, no, okay, that's all right. Maybe after my inspiring talk, you'll decide to go, ditch this whole college thing and do a new career. The other thing I like is, I tend not to be linear, and I'm good with that, and hopefully you're okay with it too. Also, please, if you have a question, ask. I've got like 40 slides. I don't expect to get through them all. The first 6 are sort of boring and have lots of words, and we'll get through those quick, and the rest are really pretty pictures. And after this morning's talk about the failing glaciers and planetary woes and the destruction and doom that is upon our little heads, I really need my pretty pictures right now. So, I'm also not technologically savvy. There's a reason I work with plants.
So are you interested in an audience that would involve the school district?
Sure.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Right? Hi.
If it was just going to be people's backyards, I was.
Well, no. In fact, because I was told it was a commercial audience, most of the landscape examples I have are commercial properties. So, okay. Oh, I went backwards. We haven't got any. See, I'm left-handed, so the forward and back to me is completely backwards. Okay, so my first quiz. What's a xeriscape? Okay.
Drought-tolerant plants.
Drought-tolerant plants. Who else has got an answer?
Landscaping that matches your environment.
Landscaping that matches the environment. Anyone else? No? Okay, those are actually 2 pretty good questions. You're actually both wrong. It's a trick question. See, what I should have had is the little TM after it. Xeriscape is a made-up word. It was coined by Denver Water in 1980s. And it was used as a tool to promote their water conservation programming. They were facing some huge drought issues and some water shortages and they wanted to get people to understand landscape impacts in a more succinct way, and they created the word xeriscape. And actually, xeriscape is a term that encompasses 7 management tools or techniques, if you will, strategies to approach a landscape. See, that's the backward thing again. It's just, so basically it's assess and know your site, right plant in right place, design a smart irrigation system, use it efficiently, know your soil, fix your soil, maintain your property, and water appropriately in sort of rephrased ways. Any questions? So this is what xeriscape really means. And why I ask this question is I think it's as we get to the pretty picture part, we'll understand why. So anyway, I'm going to go through these things pretty quick because I think we all need the pretty pictures after the whole glacier melting thing. So assessing and understanding your site, it's important to know where your sun is. We were just having a chat before this started about evergreens and where they're placed. And so often landscape struggles, plants struggle because we put a plant that, it doesn't matter what we want. This is what we have to get through our heads. A plant grows where it wants to grow, and if we put it in the wrong place, we're either going to need to give it more water, more chemicals, more something so it can survive. So if we start by knowing the site and then making choices appropriately, then we save us a lot of work and heartache, especially the heartache. So you know your site. Reflective heat is a huge issue, especially in our climate, not just for summertime, but for winter. For instance, if you walk around in your neighborhood and stuff and you notice evergreens that are against people's houses and they have a side to them that's all brown, that's because they're against a building. And what happens is some evergreens and some other plants are so photo-optically sensitive that when a day like today happens, where it's going to be 35, 45 degrees and tonight's going to be 12, that plant actually, because of the heat from the building, starts budding out. It starts becoming active. And that night, all that little new growth, those little buds that started to emerge in hopes of spring, die. They just die. And that's the brown you're seeing. So reflective heat is really an important issue for both summer and winter aspects. So knowing things like slope. Putting something on a west-facing slope is just a hot thing. You lie on that for a while and see how you feel about it. The size and shape of the landscape. You know, I have a photo, and I didn't bring it, but I have a photo of this house that has a walkway, and there's 2 spruce trees by the front path. Only the trees have grown, like they will do, and they've actually had to prune a tunnel through the trees to get up the front walk. So know the size, not only of your space, but of a plant. And think of views and visual intrusions. So plan to keep views you like, and plan to block views you don't. So this is an example of knowing your site. We've got here some yew, which are taxus, and then that's a dogwood farther up the driveway. They're well paired, they have similar water need and such. The problem is this is August, and it's about 3 in the afternoon, and these little babies are just hotter than can be. So it's kind of hot. So decent grouping, a nice look, but it's a landscape that needs more water than it probably should. Then the other part about knowing your site, know what you need and what you want. Want is really important in the landscape. You can do, it's like diets. You know, you do all the right thing, you're eating the gluten-free, flavor-free bread, and there's the no fat, no butter, and you're eating all that stuff, and you just are unhappy. It's because you're not addressing what you really need or want. So your landscape's the same. So if you really want something lush and English cottagey, you can have that. It's just how you go about it. Know that if you want, and since I thought I was talking to commercial people also, know if you need a place to relax when you do your landscape, if you're going to have a place for your employees or your kids or your students to hang out. Know if you need display areas. Know if you have a sign. There's a lot, I drive down commercial areas so often and I see landscapes and they've got, you know, pretty landscape and then they have a sign and they have to keep pruning the landscape because they didn't think about the two together. Know if you want bragging rights. But be honest, because all that beauty comes with a price, it comes with time, and no landscape is ever Honestly, no landscape worth having is ever a low maintenance landscape. Someone is doing the work even if it's not you. Yes?
Are people incorporating places to exercise along with relax?
Yeah, well, that's what, all those things. Whatever it is you want. I mean, the list goes on and on. I only have 40 minutes and 40 slides. So when you go to plan a landscape, think about everything you could possibly want. You need places for garbage cans. You need places for, I used to have a really flowery front yard, but I now have, well, now I only have one dog. It's very sad, but I had 2 dogs, both large. One loves to sit on the violets, and the other one, I have a grass I love. It's called Cesslera. It's a little ornamental grass. The other dog loves to dig up the Cesslera. And pretty much every small plant in its wake succumbs to its large paws. So know the realities of your space, but think about all the things you want. So here is a commercial property, the Garden Store. It's on 7th East. This is a site that knows what it wants. It's selling gardens. This is lush, it's beautiful, lots of pretty plants, well aspect. It's actually on the east side of their building. High maintenance, they don't care because you're paying for it when you buy their landscapes. The other thing to think about, and this goes back to the whole zero-scape notion, right plant in the right place saves money. When you don't put the right plant in the right place, it costs you money, time, water, chemicals, aggravation, sorrow. There's a wonderful essay by a garden writer who's from England, and he said, he wrote this whole essay about how he killed plants and the toll that took on his soul, about all the plants he'd ever killed. Irrigation systems. Okay, which one of these, this is another test, which one of these is the most efficient system? Drip. Drip? Any other answers? See, this is one of those tricks, you guys should start, no.
E, all of the above.
All of the above. And the reason is if you had some kind of turf and you tried to water it with drip, you would have more tubing out there than you would have turf. Each one of these systems has its pluses and minuses. For instance, the spray head, now the least efficient is probably the one on the far end, which is the spray head with the standard nozzle, which is what you see everywhere. These are what are called public sprays. And the reason they're least efficient is because they put out, which is one reason they were so popular, a ton of water really fast. The problem with them is they put out a ton of water really fast. And our soils are basically clay. So that means after about somewhere between 8 and 10 minutes of flowing water onto them, the soil surface saturates and water no longer penetrates. So after about 8 minutes, anything coming out of that nozzle is running away or evaporating. Okay? So that's one of its drawbacks. The plus about it was that for the industry, it was a sprinkler head that had a lot of control. They made a lot of different ranges. They could go like from 8 feet or 10 feet or 15 feet, and they could do quarter heads and half rounds. So it had a lot of seeming flexibilities, but it's not perfect. Gear driven, those are the really big ones. The old, like, I don't know if they're still out there. The ones that go, I love how that sounds with the mic. Everyone do it with me. Isn't that great? So those are really cool because they innately conserve water in that because they keep passing back and forth over, it wets the surface, so you break the surface tension, and then water isn't continually in the same place, so it gives water time to seep in. The problem with is they're almost impossible to use if you have a space less than 20 feet across. And they're hard to work in terms of quarter or rounds, like half heads and things. So in that sense, they're really inefficient, but they're more efficient in that they don't put out water too fast. They're just, design-wise, they're so narrow. The one in between the two, the spray head with the rotating nozzle, which is called a multi-spray and multi-trajectory head in the industry, that actually combines the two qualities of the spray head and the rotor head in that it's a little tiny pop-up spray, but the water trajectory line is broken, so that it literally, if you looked at it, it's actually not a continuous flow. And these are now available in retail, and you can buy them as retrofits. So if you're a homeowner or you have a business and you have turf, you can go out this weekend, well, maybe not this weekend because if your lawn's still under snow, but this spring, buy a bunch of the multi-trajectory heads and replace your existing sprinkler heads with them, and you will save a remarkable amount of water. Then you've got your drip irrigation, which is great in shrub borders and things like that. You've got bubblers, which can be really helpful in ground cover areas. So it depends on, so the point here is, pick the irrigation system that is most appropriate to the specific plants you're irrigating, which goes to some of our important concepts we're coming up on. One of the most important words in efficiency in a landscape is hydrozoning. I actually, on the way here, I've got 2 words. I've thought of a third one, so we'll talk about that. But anyone know what hydrozoning is? Okay, any guesses? What?
Zoning your plants by water use.
Yes! Zoning your plants by water use. So it's taking plants that have similar water needs, and not only water, but also light needs, like they want full sun, they want full shade, whatever it is. So taking plants with similar cultural needs and grouping them together and then watering them together, as opposed to watering, like there's no point, and I see this so much, you have your wonderful low water garden with your Russian sage and your black-eyed Susans and your prickly cactus, and it's being watered at the same time as the grasses. That doesn't save any water, so it's really important to isolate the different kinds of uses of your different plants in your irrigation systems. This is a really well hydrozoned landscape. We've got lavender and catmint and dwarf fescues, and even the trees are lower water, although they need more water, more volume of water. And the best way to, little cheating there, no peeking, everyone close their eyes. To hydrozone trees into a landscape, match them to the frequency of water needs. So for instance, if you have perennials or shrubs that need to be watered twice a month, match them to trees that need to be watered twice a month. Just plan on increasing the number of emitters to the trees, because whereas your perennials and such might only need a ½ gallon of water on an application, your trees are probably going to need 2.5 gallons. So that's how you hydrozone trees and forbs and shrubs, is by just increasing the number of emitters. A little trick there. So this is a hydrozone, and it's pretty. This is a low water landscape. It's very pretty. This is also a low water landscape. No ooze there? Isn't that lovely? Don't you want to be there? This is a low water landscape. The grass is actually a low water fescue. The white shrubs are viburnums and Annabelle hydrangeas. The vines are low water, and the trees are. That's what's pollarded over the only high water plant there is the annuals, and they're in little tiny containers, so they can be watered independently. So though this landscape takes a bit more water than the one we just saw, it's still really well hydrozoned, and it's still a xeriscape, because it takes all those things into consideration. It thought about its aspect and the soil, and it grouped plants together with similar needs. The other most important word in efficiency, maintenance. Everything's you need to be maintained, your family needs to be maintained, businesses need to be maintained, landscapes need to be maintained. Just accept it, just accept it. So someone was saying earlier it was the Energy Star folk. They were talking about doing this program where in May they want to remind people to check their sprinkler system. Well, that's groovy. I want to remind people to check their sprinkler system every time they turn it on. That's kind of improbable. So every time you mow, or every time you have your lawn mowed, that's when you should check your sprinkler system, because probably the #1 damager to your irrigation system is a lawnmower. But maintenance is really big. It's also important for your landscape, because if you can identify a problem before it becomes really critical, just like everything else, forestalling things, being proactive reduces maintenance needs for the future. Here we are doing maintenance. This is one of Salt Lake City's demonstration gardens. And I recognized that I had a garden I couldn't maintain myself. I wished something too big that I couldn't manage. So I get friends to help. And so we do community cleanups. I wish they would come to my yard. So this is maintenance that hasn't happened. I don't know if you can tell. There's a little thing. See that little, where's my little laser pen? See that little thing up here? That's actually a bird. It's starting to nest. This is a broken sprinkler head. It's been there long enough that Phragmites was starting to grow, and there was a killdeer that was starting to nest nearby. Maintenance issues. You can have the best irrigation system around, really efficient parts, But if you don't design it correctly, here we've got grass is grown up, the head's low, so it's only watering this part. The other problem is they've set a head here level, but it's watering up a hill. Well, it can't water up a hill because the land is in the way. So it's not very good design and it's not very well maintained. So maintenance tips, make a schedule, take notes. I photograph my yard all the time. It helps me remember what's where. It helps me remember what I like and don't like. It helps me make notes about what I need to change. It also helps me record issues. But keep notes. Do it electronically, do it with photos, do it journaling. If you're responsible, anyone here responsible for a property that isn't theirs, like you're a commercial landscaper or you have you're a business that has a landscape you're responsible for? Okay. All these things, especially if you're a professional, these are really critical issues. Note what doesn't work. We make mistakes all the time. I'm always changing landscapes. Okay, this is all, just water appropriately. This is simple. How to save water in a landscape. Water appropriately. Water when plants need it. There's a really easy trick to know when a landscape needs water. If you look at on a really hot day, go out and look at your garden in the evening, and for the most part, a lot of the leaves will be sort of, they'll be hanging down. You'll be hanging down. Your hair is going to be stringy. You're all hot and flushed. Well, your plants are going to be the same. It's a coping mechanism. Dropping those leaves reduces the amount of light on those leaves, so the solar heat, and it's not a bad thing. So your plants don't need water. Look at them first thing in the morning. If you get up first thing in the morning and you go out and look at your garden and all the leaves are down, that's a bad sign. That means they need water. So overnight they should recover and those little leaves should get perky. So if the leaves are down in the morning, then you know you need to water. So that's one good indicator. Another one is if you have turf, and turf is not a bad thing. Turf isn't the problem. Turf does not turn on a sprinkler. If you have your turf and it gets sort of a silvery cast, unless it's a buffalo grass, a warm season grass, generally speaking, silvery cast means it's getting dry. Or if you walk across it and the blades stay flat for a few minutes, like even 5 or so minutes after you've walked across it, it's time to water. Another good way to know if you need to water a landscape, get a really big screwdriver. I have one that's about 8 inches. Plunge it into the ground in your garden, whether it's your turf or a shrub border or a perennial border or your vegetable garden. If it goes in easily, you don't need to water because the moisture creates resistance and it makes it easy for your screwdriver or any object to go through the soil. If your soil is dry, then the screwdriver is not going to go in, and it only goes in as deep as the water line is. So if it goes in a few inches, then you go, okay, I don't need to water today, but maybe tomorrow. If you can't get your screwdriver in more than about an inch or so, it's time to water. It's a really simple way to know if you need to water. Oh, backwards again, because I got it upside down. No?
So how do you know if you're watering too much?
Yes. I'm what?
How do you know if you're watering too much? Do you have a way to know if you're watering too much?
Yes. Oh, the question is how to know if you're watering too much. Leaves, the tips of leaves turn brown, and that's because water displaces oxygen in the soil. So, and it also causes soluble salts to collect. So if the leaf tips turn brownish, it means your soils are wet too long. Also things like powdery mildew and fungus is an indicator, and leaves turning yellow and dropping out of season. So if in the middle of the summer you have a shrub that all of a sudden gets yellow leaves and they drop, then that's also an indicator that it's too wet. Good question. A good way to know if you're watering too much in your turf, do a catch cup test. Go to our website, slch2o.com, and find a link to how to do a free water audit. Get a rain barrel. The state only allows you to have 2 of them up to 100 gallons unless you have one underground, but hey, I'm not counting and I won't tell. So here we go. So these are the, so I'm going to ask the question now again. What's a xeriscape?
Made up word.
It's a made-up word. It is. But more importantly, xeriscape is any landscape that is well maintained. You know, I don't like the word because we have a lot of baggage around it. It conjures up, you know, prickly, spiny plants, cactus, and things. And I admit, I like my flowers. I want my garden opulent. And I can do that and still have a xeriscape.
Most people call it xeroscape.
That is, in the way most people landscape it is, but it doesn't have to be, as I'm going to show you. So this is your classic Utah xeriscape. This is native plants. By the way, if anyone wants to know what a plant is, we've got about 20 minutes, right? Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, so if anyone wants to know what plants are, please ask, because I don't want to go into too much detail if you don't want to know. So these are native plants. The pretty yellow thing in the front, that's rabbit brush, which is really cool. There's nothing that beats it for fall color. But it needs a really dry. The one thing about plants that want low water is if you give them more water, it doesn't make them happier. It makes them floppy. It makes them lazy. It makes them go to seed too quick. It sometimes makes them go to seed when you don't want them to. This is a xeriscape. It's a lovely landscape, even if I do say so myself. One great way to reduce your water demand in a landscape is to reduce the amount of plants you have by, for instance, putting a patio in place of a turf. If you're not using lawn as lawn, this place is actually getting used now more than it did before when there was lawn here. They put little tables out. The plants are generally low water. They're grouped by, in fact, one of the concepts I said there's two important concepts, hydrozoning and maintenance. The other one is microclimate, which is a really important concept for landscaping. A microclimate is little climates that are created as a result of other things like buildings or bigger plants, streets, driveways, parking lots. This is why we have heat island effect, is because a parking lot can change the ambient air temperature just by the fact that it's large and black and sucking up heat all day long. So microclimate's really important. So in this front yard, there's actually 4 different microclimates and the plants are grouped accordingly, but more importantly, the irrigation system is divided into 4 zones. So the hottest, sunniest space can be watered more if it needs to be. The shadier spaces can be watered less often. It's a very efficient landscape, despite the fact that it's all full of flowers and blooming things and cherry trees. This is another view of the same landscape. Ornamental grasses are your friends. Embrace them, love them. They don't have pests, they don't need fertilizers. You cut them down once a year. They make noise in the landscape, they rustle like the ocean. Birds love them, bugs don't. They are your friends. And there's all kinds now. There's so many now in the trade than there used to be. That's a miscanthus. We've got a switchgrass, little lavenders. I think lavenders are also, every landscape should have a lavender. Think fall. We don't have a very long growing season here. I mean, it's now February, well, tomorrow's March. My yard is covered with snow. Don't forget about the fall and don't forget about winter when you plan your landscape. So the grasses, this is the same plants we just saw. So those 2 grasses are these 2 grasses. And now that one's got all these wonderful flowers on it, the other one's going to take on a beautiful golden tone. Things are taking on their winter hues. Fall is really important and it will make your heart sing and you won't hate winter so much. Another commercial property, as a commercial property goes, this is pretty low maintenance, in part because there's a hierarchy of maintenance with plants in the landscape. It's not exact because it depends on, like if you put a plant that wants a lot of shade in a sunny place, you've created a high maintenance plant. But generally a hierarchy is trees are the least maintenance, shrubs, then perennials, and then annuals, and turf, depending on the type of turf, is somewhere between perennials and annuals. Now, does anyone not know what a perennial is? And it's okay if you don't. Thank you for saying that, because they probably didn't either. So a perennial is a plant that comes back every year, year after year. Technically, trees are perennial. They're just big woody perennials. Mostly we think of perennials as flowers, but they come back year after year from the same crown. They spread by growing. Yes? Roses are a perennial, absolutely, yay, good. Annuals, on the other hand, are plants that go from seed to flower in a single growing season. Now some annuals reseed freely in the yard, like alyssum and cosmos and larkspur, but they still are annuals. Some annuals some perennials are not winter hardy. Geraniums, for instance, the pot geraniums are perennial, are technically annuals, but or perennials. They live for a long time, but they don't take cold. So if you were out on the California coast, you'd have them as shrubs, practically. Here, we put them in pots like that one photo. So here, this is a relatively low maintenance landscape because there's no flowers. Flowers, whether it's a perennial or an annual, are typically more maintenance. There's also no turf, which is probably one of the highest maintenance plants in the landscape, presuming you have to water it and mow it regularly. So this is a relatively low maintenance landscape. And it's okay, it's kind of quiet. In the fall, it really rocks though. Here's another landscape. It's pretty low maintenance. They sort of forgot to remember how much space you have because the Russian sage has taken over half of the walkway. But it's a good selection for a hot sunny space. This place it's a nice combination of flowers and grasses. This is just outside of Sugar House. In fall, this landscape sings because all the grasses are golden or red, and they have a bunch of sedums and black-eyed Susans and all this stuff happening. This is a really great fall garden. But it shows you that commercial properties and such, which is what they told me I'd be talking to, so sorry. But this would be a great front yard landscape. But again, relatively low maintenance because of those, you've got to love those grasses. This is another commercial property. There's another plant that if you have space in your garden, and hopefully you do, this little guy here. The photo doesn't do him well. It's Iris Pallida variegata, which is variegated iris. It has, of all the irises, it has the best foliage, lasts all summer long. When other irises get tatty and tired looking, Pallida variegata just stands there looking gorgeous and golden and green. The flowers are mid-spring, late spring, sky blue, smell like grape juice. Seriously, put them in your yard, it'll smell like grape juice when they bloom. And so they have this kind of a short blooming period, but it's so worth it because the smell is astonishing. Cut them and bring them inside, your house will smell like grape juice. So the combination of the lavender and the iris are really nice because it's really fragrant. And again, relatively low maintenance plants. Another great property, again, this would be a great front yard. There's some grasses, there's some flowering things. Think seasonally. This isn't looking like much, but it looked great in June. I think this picture was taken in July. The big, that's in the corners, Provence lavender. It's not a lavender for a small space. Provence lavender is almost as big as me. I mean, it gets like 3-4 feet across. It gets really woody at the base. Doesn't like to be pruned. Big plant. The ornamental grasses are great. The little guy with the fluffy stuff on it, this is a fountain grass, which blooms kind of early compared to other grasses, so it's nice because then you have something going on all the time. Very low water landscape, by the way. Here's a great, they really like plants here. So this is also another business, and what's cool is their logo is back here, and this is where I said talk about what you want your landscape to represent, and they wanted to showcase their business, and they have a piece of art here that is their logo, and so they've got this dancer dancing in the middle of all those grasses, which is really cool. This is probably on the water use scale, probably like a weekly, sometimes maybe the end of July, early August would probably need watering twice a week, maybe, but the rest of the time not bad, in part because it's so heavily treed that there's a lot of shade. And so shade is a real good friend to a low water landscape, except for a lot of traditional low water plants don't like shade. So, but there's a lot of plants that love dry shade. Hydrangeas, I mean, not the big pink and blue ones, but there's a white flowered one that is called Annabelle, and it does great dry shade. Snowberries, which have beautiful little flowers, but also great fruit all winter long. Chokeberries, all kinds of shrubs, like shady places look pretty. And there's the iris again. Love that iris. Vegetable gardens can be a xeriscape. Raised beds are a great way to save water in a vegetable garden because it helps control where you water. It also helps protect your soil quality because you're not compacting it by walking on it all the time. Also, the other advantage of raised beds, especially in our climate, is one is we have lousy clay soil in some places. So it's hard as rock, So by raising the bed, you control your soil type. But the other advantage is because it's raised a bit, it drains better. So come spring, you're vegetable gardening sooner than your neighbors are. This time last year, I was planting peas. I'm not going to be planting peas this weekend because I still have like 2 feet of snow in my backyard. But raised beds mean you can plant sooner. But also, see here, they've got this really great, they built an incredibly intricate irrigation system. You don't need it that intricate. I just get weeper hoses. You know, it's a black hose, it's recycled rubber, and they don't have holes in them, the whole thing just weeps. And I just roll that through my vegetable garden every spring, and I roll it up every fall. I drag my hose out to it. I don't have a sprinkler system. I just drag my hose out to the hose end, and I screw it on, and I water when I need to. Vegetable gardens are not low water. The water savings is in how well you deliver it, and also if you have a raised bed like this, or even if you do mounds, that you're only watering where the vegetables are. So that's how you save water over. Otherwise, they're as consumptive as turf, bluegrass. But raised beds is a great way to go. So even a vegetable garden can be a xeriscape. This is the garden of an artist. I mean, there's tons of stuff happening here, very untraditional. But again, this is also xeriscape landscape. This is a xeriscape. This is not what you normally think of when we talk about xeriscape. And yeah, there's boxwood, and you know, we think of those as, there's a lot of shrubs that we see in landscapes that are really heavily watered that don't have to be, as long as you put them in the right place. Yews, hydrangeas, boxwoods, give them the shelter they need in the mid-afternoon, and they actually do remarkably well on, even if it's only a weekly irrigation. Now that's not really low water, but if you've been watering those plants daily or every other day, if you only go to once a week, then you're saving a lot of water. This is a low water landscape. Anyone want to guess what kind of grass that is? Can you tell? I don't know from out where you're sitting if the picture's very clear. You can just barely see these are little seed heads. That's a buffalo grass lawn. It's a very low, see, lawn is not, even bluegrass lawn, typically the older bluegrass is needed about anywhere from 24 to 36 inches of water in a season, which is a lot of water. That's like twice as much as we get in snowfall in the valley typically. They're working on propagating bluegrasses right now that need only 18 to 24 inches. And the value of a bluegrass lawn is that it's very repairable. Grasses grow 4 ways, turf grasses. They grow from seeds, they grow from the crown spreading, they grow from little roots on the surface, which are called stolons, or they grow from roots underneath, which are called rhizomes. Some grasses grow only one way, which means that when they're damaged, it takes them longer to grow. Bluegrass grows all 4 ways. That's why it's so popular, because it repairs itself so readily. So if you're playing on a lawn, bluegrass is the way to go. Yes?
The bluegrass that you're talking about, is that like the luscious green that you see like the typical like
It is.
lawns?
It is the luscious green. The newer bluegrasses are being crossed, like the Kentucky blue are being crossed with, there's actually, bluegrass is POA, P-O-A, and there are POAs that are native to Texas and Arizona and even Utah. And there are hybridizers working on crossing Kentucky blue, which is that beautiful lush green, with these other western POAs to create a more water-wise, high salt-tolerant, high-traffic, disease-resistant turf. So bluegrass by itself isn't necessarily a bad one, it's just which one you pick. There's also dwarf fescues, which are almost as lush and green. The warm season grasses like this, the buffalo grass, the side oats, grama, blue grammas, those tend to be more of a softer green and a different look, more of a, I think of an organic look, less manicured, but really tough. This buffalo grass lawn gets watered twice a year and only gets mowed once a year. That's a low maintenance lawn. That's lower maintenance than any of the other landscapes we've looked at so far. This is a low water landscape. Lots of grasses, lots of shrubs, not a lot of turf. This is a low water landscape, really pretty flowers. That's one of the winter hardy ice plants. And then there's the dwarf blue fescues behind it. That's a low water landscape. That's a different kind of turf. It's actually dwarf fescue. And that's what they planted their front. And what's cool is they planted it in rows. And it's really a fascinating landscape. It's very modern. This is a low water landscape. This is our water conservation demonstration garden, our other one. This is the Greater Avenues Garden. And Water Week is an opportunity to celebrate all things water. It happens the first full week in May. Just a little plug. I've got one of my Water Week partners back there, Elizabeth Hogelzoo. This is one of the tools we're offering up, Salt Lake City. We're working on constructing this website. I don't know if you noticed in the photos of the landscapes, there were little squares. I don't know if you could see those. What GardenWise is a website we're building, which is an interactive website where you can actually go in and tour all these landscapes. So you'd actually walk in the front pathways and walk through the whole landscape. You can learn about the plants in the landscape by keying over them and getting information. You can make shopping lists about the plants you want. You can make maintenance manuals by selecting plants for your existing landscape. There's all kinds of resources. It's going to be gorgeous. It goes live officially June 1st. And you'll find it at slc.com/gardenwise. Are there any questions?
You talk a lot about ornamental grasses, but I really like them. But I have a hard time finding ones that will do well in shade.
Okay, the ones that do, the question was ornamental grasses in shade. Most of your miscanthus, as long as you don't overhead water them or water them too much, do actually pretty, are you talking like, okay, I'm gonna talk for 30 seconds about sunlight. Plants should generally think of it as a full sun plant. That means it'll take sun, not necessarily all day, but think of it as a heat index. It'll take sun from like 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. I don't care if it gets shade before then or after then. If you're in the sun at that time of day, you're a full sun plant. Part sun plants, it's important to think about when they're going to get the sun. So if something is a part shade plant or a part sun plant, know whether or not it can take the heat of the day. Because there are plants that need part shade, but they won't take that midday sun. So they want sun either early in the morning or later in the evening, but not in the middle of the day. Full shade plants can take that full range of shade, and then there's dense shade. So there are grasses that will take sort of filtered shade and full shade, but not dark shade. The miscanthus are really good choices. Most of your grasses that have variegated foliage, like your overdam grass, which is a calamagrostis, or featherweed. It's a variegated featherweed. It grows about so tall. That will take part shade. One of my favorite little grasses is called Cecularia. And it's not easy to find. Willard Bay, Barney Barnett always has it. Cecularia is a really fine textured, soft green grass, perfectly arching, gets a little flower on it that self-cleans, so you don't have to even deadhead the thing. It's not very tall growing, but it actually grows in the middle, like my iris grow in the middle of it, and they all cohabitate really well. And that does really well in shade. Your mondo grasses, the Ophiopogons, they do really, really well in shade. In fact, they're also called Liriopes. L-I-R-I-O-P-E. So the Liriopes do really well in shade. Did that help?
Yes.
What do you think some of the best ways are to control weeds in these type of landscapes?
Other than moving, I try to not use chemicals, whether they're organic or otherwise, in terms of pesticides and herbicides. Judicious hand pulling. Early in the season, getting out there early and pulling. Bindweed is almost impossible to conquer. It's one of the things I use chemicals on. Glyphosate, which is the active ingredient in Roundup, which is produced by Monsanto, who's the evil empire of the chemical world. I hate that I buy that product. I actually feel like I should whip myself on the back with birch leaves or birch branches or something when I buy it. When bindweed is blooming, it is most susceptible to pesticide or herbicides because blooming takes a lot of energy. In fact, that's the case for most weeds. When they're flowering, they're sucking up all the nutrients in the water. So if you hit them then with chemicals, you use less chemical and you won't have to use it as long because they're sucking it all up because they're flowering. None of us can look gorgeous all the time. We know this, really. So flowers, that's why annuals are short-lived, because they look beautiful all the time, they burn themselves out. Perennials live longer because they're not trying to flower all the time. Flowering takes a lot of energy, so when a weed is in flower, it's susceptible to damage. So it's a really good time to kill it. Not letting weeds go to flower and then go to seed. So sometimes the best way, like if you have dandelions, if you can't get out and weed them all and they're in the lawn, mow them and catch the heads. Don't compost, don't just bag them and throw them away, because at least then you're collecting some of the seeds and you're reducing the population that way. keeping a good layer of mulch, 3 to 4 inches deep, consistently is a really great way. And then also growing plants so they all touch. When there's not space between plants, you're less likely to have weeds, because weeds are fat and sassy and they take it easy.
So when we're talking about mulch and growing plants together, you've got to start out with a couple plants that they put apart and are supposed to grow together. But if you're putting a lot of mulch out, does that discourage your plants to plant it?
The only thing it might discourage, there are some plants that propagate by seeding, and some seeds don't like to seed in mulch, they rather seed in gravel. But generally, good. That plastic stuff or the fiber barrier things that people put down, don't do it. Please don't. Ever, ever. Promise me, do this for me. If you never see me again, if you never do anything else for your landscape, don't buy it. It's a petrochemical-based product. It can't be recycled, and it goes in the landfill, and it will last 10,000 years. Plants can't spread through it. So you put that stuff down and you cut little holes in it and you put your perennials in it, but the perennials can't grow because they can't grow through the visqueen or the fiber barrier cloth. So don't do that. But if you keep a mulch layer and then stay on, what happens is the weed seeds will blow around and they'll land on the top and they'll go to seed, but they're easier to pull out because they're rooting into the mulch and not into the earth, so it's easier to pull them out. But it won't inhibit your perennials because they're growing from their crowns, and most perennials will be okay with that. Little tiny perennials and little ground covers, put your mulch down and then plant your ground cover into the mulch, like your thyme and stuff, and they'll find their way down, or make your mulch there a little bit thinner. But for most part, your perennials will be fine. Just don't pile up the mulch at the base of the plant, because the mulch will keep the trunks and the crowns and the stems wet. So don't do that. But mulch is your friend. Any other questions? Yes?
You talk about those two types of sprinkler, right? It's the spray and the stream.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you always hear water less frequent, but
More deep.
I mean, does that change? Because you talked about it's a lot of water quickly and it runs off. So
Yeah, thank you.
Very bad.
Yeah, the idea is that you water less often, more deeply. When you have a sprinkler system, the best way to do it is to do what's called cycling, which is where in the course of a single evening when you're watering, rather than watering for 20 minutes, you water for 8 minutes, it's off for a while, and you water for 8 minutes, it's off for a while, and you water for 8 minutes. And modern timers allow you to do that. And so that cycling helps with that process and gives water time to percolate into the soil layers.
If you're using those spray times,
Right. If you do drip, you don't have to do that.
Do you recommend changing those?
I do. I think the micro-emitter, the multi-stream, multi-trajectory heads they're good. They're very good. And most of them can be retrofitted into existing systems. What you want to make sure though is that your system, you don't want to have different kinds of heads on the same zone, because they all put out water differently, so that means one place is going to be overwatered and one place is going to be underwatered. So make sure if you're changing sprinkler heads that you're changing a single zone. Any other questions? You guys, thank you very much. I think we've met our time. I appreciate you asking me down here, and have a wonderful day, and yay spring, let's go gardening.